Hey listeners, it's Swedian. Wanted to let you know that there won't be a new episode this week. I'm in the middle of my move back home to Indonesia. So in the meantime, we wanted to repeat an episode about a topic that we can always have more conversations on, and that's our episode on mental health. So, by our next episode, I'll be back home in Indonesia. So until then, here's to it.
Welcome to the 65th episode of Dialogika, a podcast between two friends about the latest in society, politics, and feminism in Indonesia and the world. I'm Stephanie Tangkilisan.
And I'm Swedian Lee.
This week we're talking about mental health and issues surrounding stigma about it, a little bit of biology and medicine related to it, and just tips for self-care and acceptance.
Just to be clear, neither Stephanie or I are mental health experts, but I think having just a conversation between friends about it is already more than what is happening right now in the space. I think mental health is a very important issue to talk about openly, and we hope that this conversation will be useful for our listeners.
Here's to it.
So Stephanie and I have actually wanted to have this conversation for a long time now. A few of our listeners have in the past reached out and said, you guys should have a conversation around mental health and just talk about it. And I've always been fascinated by it, and I've wanted to talk about it. And actually, this topic is kind of topical right now just because Sandi, who is Prabowo's running mate and is the vice presidential candidate, talked about how if he and Prabowo were elected, that their administration will focus more on mental health, which is a topic and a field that has been undercovered and definitely not talked about by the government or by society in general. There's a huge stigma around it, and we hope that this conversation will do a little bit of a part in destigmatizing and just opening up potential entry points into the conversation around mental health.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
So I think just to start off with where we're coming from in this conversation, Sweden is an asshole. Sweden is...
Explain that to me.
Very lucky in his genetic. Sweden is very fortunate to not have to deal with any mental health issues because, I don't know, you're really annoying. But he does have a lot of friends with a lot of variety of issues.
Yeah.
And I personally struggle with anxiety and some depressive episodes. But, and I've been someone who's been going to therapy, I think, for years now. So, that's where we're coming from. Neither of us are doctors, psychiatrists, or psychologists. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. Though, if you're listening to our podcast, you should have taken lots of grains of salt by now. So we just want to talk about it in terms of, at least just talking about the stigma around it and how we shouldn't be so scared of those words, and then try and encourage people to look for help.
And part of this, I think, is a conversation around mental health globally in general. I feel like culturally it's becoming more, at least maybe I'm biased, right? We live in the West. Maybe it's a little bit more open here that, people are starting to talk about it more. People in pop culture are starting talking about it more. Self-care is a phrase that now exists in the world, that is not just a thing that exists in small circles of people who suffer from mental health. And so, like Stephanie said, I wouldn't say I have mental health issues. I wouldn't say I suffer from mental health issues, but I do want to figure out how to be a good friend, how to be a good supporter of those who do suffer, and how can I be there for them. And honestly, if these kind of conversations don't happen, I feel like I don't know how I can, play a positive role in all of this.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we should talk about is, what is mental health and mental illness? It's a really, really broad category, and there are so many different types of it. Some of the common ones are bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depressive disorders, anxiety, obsessive compulsive and related disorders or OCD, and trauma and stress related disorders like PTSD. The suite of disorders. And but yeah, I think for the most part, especially in Indonesia, there's kind of this stigma around it or talking about it. Sometimes I think some people think, having it is a sign of weakness or you're just not strong enough.
Yeah, the fact that they still call it gangguan jiwa, it's like, you're disturbed
mentally.
My God, it's just
So I think part of the discussion that I want to address is that, like, first of all, it's not anything at all as a sign of weakness. It's a really valid thing to have, and one way to look at it would be people like to say it's a chemical imbalance and it's not your fault. So, like, destigmatizing is part of it is like recognizing that it's not your fault and what the illness makes you unable to do or do is not your fault, especially when you're doing it to yourself. I mean, if you're harming other people, that's a different story, but that's most mentally ill people do not do that at all, and there's no relation between mental illness and crimes, really. So part of it is that, but it's also recognizing that that's one way to look at it, like a more holistic way to look at it. Sure, there's certainly a chemical imbalance, but in that there's genetic factors. So your parents or grandparents have a history of different kinds of mental illness that they may or may not have told you about, and that makes you more likely to become predisposed to those issues, especially, like, for example, schizophrenia is one of those more famously, like, hereditary diseases. And then it's also part of how well functioning your neurotransmitters are. So neurotransmitters are substances, though more accurately protein, that help carry signals between your brain and that will eventually manifest. And how this is often linked to mental illness is, for example, your neurotransmitters aren't carrying your serotonin as well to your brain cells, so you can't really feel a lot of things or feel normal and happy. So
they're kind of like train conductors, right? They kind of orchestrate what's going on.
Yeah.
I think, as we're sort of like diving straight deep into the science a little bit, or sort of the mechanics behind mental health, I think it's also just from an outsider looking in, I think there's such a stigma towards mental health, and also an assumption that there is such a thing called normal, or like a standard default normal mental health, that everybody, whatever your background, your genetic history, everybody has a default that is quote unquote healthy, and that it's like an objective thing. When I feel like with the people I've encountered, everybody has their highs, everybody has their lows. At some stage, like, your mental health is something that, like your physical health, it fluctuates, and you try to keep it healthy. It's an ongoing effort, but there's no gold standard for it.
The problem with that is, I think, certainly mood swings happen, and it also really varies based on your life circumstances. The difference between that and being diagnosed with mental illness is that it's such a ever-present and or recurring part of your life.
Oh, yeah.
That, it's different and needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
In the sense of, like, for example, depression means, like, a constant feeling like that for, like, months, of more than a month, right? So the low is, like, persistent and, in a way, like, almost unending. For example, my worst months are winter, when there's not enough sun. As a girl from Indonesia, it was very shocking to me my first year in Chicago.
You had to go to Chicago. You had to go to New York.
Yeah, you just had so much less sun. So, winter months are usually difficult for me. And, it takes a lot of, first, like, recognizing that was a big part of, like, oh, this is a thing that happens to me during winter, and I shouldn't isolate myself from my friends and everyone I love. So that's kind of, recognizing that, and, like, just being more mindful of, for me, like, for example, like, really going to therapy regularly and making sure, like, even just going to therapy for me really helped in the sense of, like, oh, I'm doing something good for myself.
Yeah.
Taking care of myself. And then I make sure to wake up as soon as the sun rises and try to be near sunlight as much as I could. And exercising more.
I guess what I'm saying, obviously, I'm not trying to brush aside people's mental health episodes. I guess what I was trying to say is that for people who don't encounter it and who don't meet people who suffer from mental health issues, and I will say this, when I was growing up, when I didn't know anybody who had serious mental health issues, this is what I was thinking, right? Like, why don't you just feel better? Why don't you just, why
don't you snap out of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I feel fine. Like, I'm in the same boat as you are, in terms of, maybe we're like friends at school. We take the same classes. We're in the same socioeconomic situation. I feel fine. Why don't you feel fine? That was certainly where I was coming from, when I was younger, when I was ignorant to all of these issues. And I think for people who don't encounter others like that, they think what they're feeling right now is the gold standard, when in fact it's like, you can't just say it like that,
Yeah, no, it's probably one of the worst things to say.
And I think this is crucial in our conversation. It's hard to empathize for others coming in. Like, they can't see.
It's invisible, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is it invisible from just like perception, but it's also invisible in conversation. So you really can't empathize in terms of like the story behind it,
Mm-hmm. I'm really lucky in the sense that like I'm very functional, and that's because it's a lot of work. But even when I wasn't, I can hide it really well. And I'm generally like a social, smiley person in real life.
Yeah.
So people wouldn't usually think of me in that way. But I've had days where I like cannot get out of bed, and it's not like laziness. It's just like, like nothing feels like it's worthwhile or meaningful or whatever. And I don't know, for me it's really helpful to know that I'm not alone, and that I can there's a lot of resources that you can access online, and just like really weird things was really helpful, like going out on a walk and then noticing how beautiful the light from the trees create the shadow, and really sometimes forcing yourself to go to the gym. As shitty as it is and as hard as it is, it's like, okay, at least in this space of 1 hour, I can feel strong. And like I'm starting weight training. I'm like lifting weights now. Life update. But yeah.
I'm curious, you talked a little bit about how you're a high functioning individual, and so at times that can mask how others think whether or not you have issues.
Yeah.
In our circles and in Indonesian culture especially, I think there's such pressure to be functioning, and there's such stigma and just in general social stigma around being lazy.
Yeah.
That
for sure. Yeah.
I
mean, this is not something I've completely resolved. When I feel like that and I'm not really doing anything, I'm not really productive, I just really have so much self-loathing about myself and feeling really lazy, and then it just makes it worse. And there's a spiral of like, you feel depressed, therefore you can't really do anything, but then not doing anything makes you lazy and you make you feel more depressed, and it's fun, happy fun times.
It becomes a really hard
like
cycle to get out of.
Yeah, and then when you're not in that cycle, you're like, oh, that's silly. But when you're in it, you like can't see things any other way.
I'm asking you this as somebody from the outside looking in. For others around you, if you were in that situation, is it better for people to reach out to you or to let you have your own time? Like, let you come out at your own volition, I guess, when you're ready for it.
No, I've been forced to social situations.
Is that good or bad?
That's a good thing, at least for me.
Okay.
It's really different based on other people, and it's like not super helpful to have people tell you, oh, let me know what I can do for you. I think that's really like not super helpful because you're like, I can't think what you need to do. Like, suggest me things that we can do. Like, hey, let's go out for coffee. Hey, let's go for a walk in the park. Or, you know, it's not like...
It's not your job to tell you what to do to help me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had, like, ex-partners who've been like, oh, this is the first time it happened to me. Like, my ex-partner was like, after he realized it wasn't me, just like, I broke up with my ex-partner because I was super depressed and I didn't want to see anyone. And like, at first he was like, oh, okay, you don't want to be with me, that's fair. Like, it's totally out of nowhere, but I get it. And then he like kind of found out that I would like shut off everybody in my life, and he was like, I think this is depression. And then like semi-forced his way back into my life, and that was actually a really good thing.
That's like the first time I've heard an ex coming back into your life, and it's like actually good.
Don't always do that. Don't always do that. But in this situation, because this was the first time this happened to me, this was helpful to have someone else step in and figure out what I need to do and what was helpful for me to do. Props to that person.
A lot of my close friends who kind of suffer from something similar like yours, where it's like seasonal or, you know, seasonal mood swings or depressive periods brought on by winter. Mm-hmm. I always don't know what to do, right? Because I feel imposing if I'm there and I'm trying to, you know, urge them to.
Every person is different, but I think what I feel like is more helpful is like, instead of letting me know what I can do, as I said, it's like, okay, do you want me to leave you alone for right now, or do you want me to be here and come back? Like, just give concrete suggestions instead of like an open-ended question. Just like, you can give like A, B, or C option, you know? Like, it's not just something more specific. Okay. Or like, oh, can I make you a cup of tea or coffee or whatever? That kind of stuff would be helpful. Okay. But like, also, instead of like saying you should go to the gym, like, oh, why don't we go to the gym together? Like, you know.
That's actually a really good suggestion, because I've heard people give suggestions of like, you should go work out because you'll feel better, and then, you know, they just suggest.
Yeah, that's not helpful. Yeah. Like, if you are in a long distance friendship, like I am with a lot of my friends, like, okay, even if we can't gym together, why don't we decide to go to a gym class like separately in different cities but around the same time frame or something, you know? Like, you do yoga class and I do yoga class, and, you know, it's like a buddy system
thing. And you can text each other about it when you're taking a class or whatever. It's as close to you're gonna get to being in the same class together.
Yeah. But if they fail at it, if they don't actually do it, don't be mad or anything. Just like, or just be on Skype with them and not really talk to them. It's fine. Just watch some TV together, you know? Like, even for me, talking about it's really difficult. Because even though, like, I'm like super open about it in person. But I probably think this is the first time I'm talking about it in a semi-public way. Yeah, like, I'm super open about it in person, and I tell all of my friends to go to therapy. But it's just not fun to talk about, honestly.
I think we owe it to our listeners to be pretty candid here. How did you feel nervous about having this conversation today?
A little bit. It's more like, I don't know. It's just like puts you back in places where, you know, it's not super something that you want to recall as much.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's how it is, but it's life, and I'm in a lot better place.
Well, firstly, I think on behalf of our listeners, I feel like thank you for talking about this, because I know it can't be easy.
Yeah, I think it's... But, like, for example, I know in terms of, like, being a friend to people who deal with it, is, like, just check in on them every once in a while and be like, hey, how are you feeling? How's your mood today? Like, do you want to do this or that? Just check in, like, just have the initiative.
Yeah, of course.
And on the subject of friends, I think this is a big one, but sometimes you have to let go of your toxic friends.
You ain't got time for that.
Like, I'm pretty good at it. Like, none of my friends and friendships are toxic because
Yes.
I don't have time for it. Like, but I know some people have a really hard time staying friends with people who are trying to use them or who are friends with them, and like this friend just makes them feel horrible about themselves and stuff. And it's not just, you don't have time for this. Like, even if you've been friends with them for a really long time, it doesn't matter. And just like, or for example, stop following Instagram accounts that make you feel crappy about your life. Because, like, that feed jealousy is real, you know? Like, definitely you're always comparing people's highlight reels to your own life, and that's really not healthy. I mean, I know at some point I definitely unfollowed a lot of Instagrams that, or hide them if they're your friends, right? You can just hide their click and hide stories or whatever. And then just follow a lot more cute puppy Instagrams. That's what I do.
Yes.
Or cats, or whatever floats your boat, you know?
Whatever pet floats your boat.
Yeah. Or memes or funny things, you know? Just things that don't make you feel like
crap,
garbage. Yeah, just cut all of that out of your life.
Yes.
You don't need it. You can do it. I believe in you. We believe in you.
Get rid of all the toxic waste.
Yeah.
And I think actually this is important for myself, I think, as well.
Yeah.
It's okay to take a break from the news, you know, even if we're currently living in troubled times.
Dystopia.
You don't have to place the burden of the world
on yourself
every single second of the day. It's okay to check out.
Well, it's important for you to be informed. Part of why journalism and news exists is that we are holding truth to power accountable. So we're just making sure those people who are not doing great things know that other people are watching them.
Yeah.
So it's not on you as a person to feel crappier about yourself and your life to always know everything about the news and stuff. Do it if it makes you, like... I know in the past I have listened to Fox News in the morning just to wake myself up in replacement for coffee because rage empowers me and makes me, like, work. But that's not the effect it does for you, then don't do that.
Yes. That's not the effect it does for me. But I guess I applaud you for starting your day like that.
Especially when I'm in, like, hotels and have early morning meetings or whatever. Yeah. Like,
and you just need to get fired up.
Yeah.
I gotta say, you know, we've been doing this podcast for, my God, like, over 2 years, almost 3 years now. And
oh God, Jesus!
there are obviously many times where we've both talked about super serious stuff and super heavy stuff,
and personal stuff,
stuff. And but I think, you know, a conversation like this is as equally important as any of those deep dives into stories, into news items, because this is also real life. This is also a big conversation that needs to be happening, and I'm kind of glad we're doing this.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I think the main lesson is it's totally valid however you're feeling, or if you recognize these signs in your friends, please reach out in the ways we suggested and let them know their feelings are valid. I think part of the conversation is like why I kind of opened up a little bit is that, look, I'm someone who works hard and has achieved some things in life, and I deal with it, and it's okay for people to do so and be more frank about it. It's gonna, whatever is happening in your life, it's gonna be okay. And try to reach out to a friend, or better yet, friends reach out to your friends. And just know that there's a lot of support and help outside, and that you are not alone.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. You can find more information and resources of whatever we talked about on our website, dialogika.id.
Music credits to John Dealey, Lee Roosevelt, and of course, Broke for Free.
If you like what you hear and want to support us, please review our podcast on the Apple Podcast app or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. And please share our podcast with your friends. It's the best way to spread the word about Dialogika.
If you want to get more involved, we'd love to hear from you. Our email is dialogikapodcast@gmail.com, or just shoot us a message on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, and now Twitter. Please follow us in these various platforms. Our Twitter handle is at Dialogika Pod. Also, follow me on Twitter. It's Stephtang. That's STEPHTANGK.
Thank you again, and see you guys next time.
Bye!